Throughout history, we see major cultural, social, religious, economic, and political changes that have influenced our modern societies we take for granted. So let's reflect on humanity's rich history to provide us a deeper understanding of the world we live in. Let's start with the Song Dynasty. This was the golden age of China with its use of civil service exams, the commercializing of its economy, and the introduction of champa rice. Through Neo-Confucianism, the Song legitimized its rule and kept order, though women experienced much social oppression, most evident in the foot-binding tradition. China's influence also spread into the neighboring Japanese, Vietnamese, and Korean states with varying degrees due to geological and political differences. As these events occurred in China, major developments were beginning to take shape in the Middle East as Islamic political entities began to emerge. For centuries after the creation of the Islamic faith, the Abbasid Caliphate was the dominating ruler of Dar al-Islam. However, the dynasty's power waned as Turkic-speaking pastoralists arrived in 1000 CE. Not soon after, the Turks took power themselves and established the Seljuk Turkic Empire and the Ottoman Empire. In contrast, Europe was fragmented, composed of multiple decentralized kingdoms who governed under manorialism. In manorialism, serfs provided labor and the lords provided protection. This era of Europe was considered feudalist Europe, though it would eventually come to a deadly end, which we'll get to later. On the other side of Earth, the Americas were flourishing with new societies. After the Maya civilization collapsed, the newer Aztec civilization formed through deliberate military conquests. The Aztecs were one of the more sophisticated early American societies, taking part in many bloody ritual sacrifices to appease their patron deity. Further south, the Inca lived among the long Andean mountain range, unified under one supreme emperor and maintaining a unique tax labor system known as mita.
Let's move on to networks of exchange. Many new trade routes appeared across Eurasia, such as the Silk Road and the Trans-Saharan. These new trade routes flourished due to enhanced trade practices and technologies that expanded trade volume and geographical reach. The Indian Ocean trade network thrived with the help of the compass, Latin sail, and larger ships, connecting hubs like the Swahili coast and Malacca. Another land route that grew was the Trans-Saharan trade. The growth of the Trans-Saharan trade was driven by innovations such as the camel saddle, caravanserai, and the introduction of Arabian camel, which improved trade efficiency of products like gold, salt, and textiles. One of the biggest developments was the Great Mongol Empire. Unified by Genghis Khan, the Mongol Empire expanded rapidly through conquest, creating the largest contiguous empire in history. The Mongol Empire was eventually replaced by some states that reflected pre-Mongol rule. The Mongols encouraged trade and provided better protection for merchants along the Silk Road, which allowed the trade network to flourish. Unfortunately, this led to the spread of the Black Plague in Europe, which decimated the population and ended the feudalist era in Europe, as serfs began to demand for a higher pay since there weren't as many serfs.
No.
Now let's move on to the period 1450 to 1750. This was a time when land-based empires used old and new strategies to expand, consolidate power, and legitimize their rule. In Russia, Ivan IV used military might and gunpowder weapons to expand the Russian Empire eastward and southward. Meanwhile, in East Asia, the Manchu people conquered China to create the Qing dynasty, though it didn't last long. This growth was also prominent in the Middle East. For example, the Ottoman Empire's expansion accelerated when it conquered Constantinople in 1453. Then, it continued to gain vast amounts of territory. The Ottomans' Devshirme system created a strong system of fighters and loyal bureaucrats through the recruitment of Christian boys to serve in an elite military class or an administrative role. The Shia-led Safavid Empire also underwent growth, coming into conflict with its neighboring Sunni states. Finally, the Mughal Empire expanded into the Indian subcontinent and flourished under the rule of Akbar the Great, who fostered peaceful relations between Hindus and Muslims. European states were also transitioning away from the weak feudal systems towards strong absolute monarchies post-plague. Following this was the Protestant Reformation, which heavily influenced much in Europe. The Reformation began when Martin Luther, a German monk, nailed his 95 Theses to the front door of a church. The Theses presented objections to many of the church's practices and roles, and promoted justification by faith alone, which implied that the church was unnecessary to salvation. Another change in beliefs was the scientific revolution. This was a shift from superstitious understandings of the universe to observational understandings based on facts and evidence. This challenged many viewpoints held by the church. For example, we see Galileo, Kepler, and Copernicus using their research to prove the heliocentric theory. Later, the Enlightenment applied these concepts into social affairs, as ideas from John Locke and Montesquieu gained popularity.
Cross-cultural interactions also spread technology and transformed trade and travel. European colonization of the Americas led to the Great Dying in Spanish America, where 90% of the native population was killed through disease. Portuguese sugar plantations were also established, causing a high demand for slaves and the growth of the transatlantic slave trade. Additionally, the Columbian Exchange introduced new crops and animals, such as potatoes and horses, boosting population growth in Europe and introducing the ranching culture in the Americas. Meanwhile, the Portuguese also attempted to establish a trading post empire in the Indian Ocean to control the spice and trade through military force, but were largely unsuccessful in monopolizing the trade and eventually fell into the role of acting as shipping services for other countries. Following this, the Dutch and British governments sponsored the VOC and British East India Companies, supporting joint stock companies and creating trade empires in the Indian Ocean network.
Next, revolutions. In the late 1700s to early 1800s, many major revolutions occurred, the American, French, and Haitian, all of which can be attributed to newfound Enlightenment ideals. The earliest of the three was the American Revolution. On July 4th, 1776, England's American colonies declared their independence to protect their rights, fight tyranny, and enjoy free trade. They succeeded with France's aid, which helped kickstart the French Revolution on July 14, 1789, with the goal of taking power away from the monarchy. Little did the early revolutionists know, the revolution would leave France with tens of thousands of people, King Louis XVI, and Marie Antoinette guillotined. The revolution officially came to an end in 1799 when Napoleon declared himself the ruler of France. In the same year, Haitian slaves formed the only successful slave rebellion, declaring their independence from France. Unfortunately, the lack of sugar production in Haiti led to an uptick in slavery everywhere else, and demands for compensation from France and the lack of functioning machinery made Haiti one of the poorest countries, even today. Also, the loss of income from Haiti led to Napoleon selling his American land to the United States in the Louisiana Purchase.
These transformations politically, socially, economically, and religiously all contribute to where we are today. But this story isn't over.